I'm a 70-year-old father and granddad. This morning started like any other. Coffee, a quick bank stop my daughter insisted on. At the desk she slid forms at me. My son-in-law stood too close, palm on my shoulder. Dad, just sign. You already agreed last week. It cut deep. I raised her to tell the truth. But I live by one rule now. Trust, then verify. I quietly slipped the manager a note. Help, not my choice. And right then my phone lit up with a text, accidentally sent to me. If he balks, say he agreed last week. Move the deposit to hold suite 214 by Friday. The branch froze everything. Next, a judge read our papers. You'll want to hear what he said, and what I signed instead. Stay with me to the end, and tell me the city you're watching from. The morning started with the sharp whistle of the old radiator in my kitchen, puffing steam against the window where frost etched thin veins across the glass. I wrapped my hands around a chipped mug of coffee, the same mug I'd used since my wife passed, and let the bitter warmth settle me. Retirement was supposed to mean rest, but for me it was discipline, routine, shaving at dawn, a short walk, reading the paper, and keeping my mind sharp. That morning, though, there was a different tension humming in my bones. I stared at the pale November sky and thought about Celine, my daughter. Once, she used to call me about small things, recipes, how to change a tire. But now our conversations were clipped, rehearsed, designed to push me towards some decision I hadn't chosen. And Dorian, her husband, always looming behind her words like a shadow with a smirk. The phone buzzed. A text from Celine. Quick bank stop this morning. Dad, shouldn't take long. Quick. Nothing with her was quick anymore. I set the phone down, muttering an old phrase my father used to say. Trust, once broken, is like shattered glass. It never fits back together. I dressed carefully, choosing the wool coat my wife had bought me 30 years ago. Before stepping out, I looked in the mirror. The lines on my face weren't just age, they were maps of battles fought silently. I told myself I'd be ready. Celine and Dorian pulled up in their glossy SUV, their smiles too practiced, like actors rehearsing lines. Celine leaned across the seat and handed me a paper bag with the logo of a bakery. Got you breakfast, Dad, she said sweetly. Inside. I could feel the stiff edges of folded documents beneath the croissant. Not food, contracts. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face flat, nodding as though fooled. Dorian laughed in that shallow way of his. We just want to make sure everything's in order. Smart planning, for your age. I bit into the pastry, chewing slowly, tasting nothing. They thought I was too frail to notice their tricks. My silence was my shield. I've learned silence unsettles people more than shouting. At one point, Celine slipped her hand into my coat pocket. I looked down and saw her pull out my house keys. Safer this way, she murmured, smiling. You lose things all the time, Dad. Her words sliced deeper than she knew. She dangled the names of my grandchildren like a ransom. Don't you want to make sure Alara and the twins are taken care of? I stared out the car window, Cincinnati streets flashing by, and tightened my grip on the paper bag. Hamilton Trust loomed tall, glassy and pristine. On Erie Avenue. Inside, the scent of disinfectant mixed with polished wood, cold as a courtroom. I adjusted my coat and followed them to the front desk. Lucinda Fox, the bank manager, appeared, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She was the kind of woman who measured people in seconds, and I saw her look at me, then at Celine and Dorian, noting the imbalance. Mr. Brenner, she greeted me warmly. Before I could reply, Celine jumped in. Dad just needs to sign a few things. Shouldn't take long. Her voice was fast, practiced, like a script rehearsed too often. Dorian added, We've got a notary friend waiting. This will be smooth. I felt their net tightening, but inside, I reminded myself, silence is not surrender, it's strategy. Lucinda led us to a table in a glass-walled office. Sunlight bounced off the polished floors, blinding in its clarity. I sat down, steadying my hands on the table. Celine slid the papers forward, her manicured finger tapping the signature lines. Just here, Dad, and here. Dorian placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. his smile stiff. "He needs a little guidance sometimes," he said to Lucinda, as though I were absent. In my mind, I heard my wife's voice, sharp and protective. "Don't you ever let them bully you." Alaric. I remembered her funeral. How Celine spoke about moving on, already calculating. My grip on the pen trembled, not from weakness, but from holding back. Lucinda's eyes lingered on me. She wasn't fooled. Her brow furrowed as she watched Celine's impatience. Dorian's condescension. I glanced at the pen, imagining it as a sword. The weight of the moment pressed in. Should I fight here, or bide my time? While Dorian turned to adjust his cuff, I slid my hand into my pocket and pulled out a small folded slip of paper. I had prepared it earlier, knowing there might be no chance to speak freely. I wrote carefully, "Help, not my choice." The ink bled slightly on the paper, but the words were strong. "Did you see the Bengals game last night?" I asked Dorian suddenly, masking my movement with idle talk. He smirked, eager to brag about the score. At that moment, I pushed the note toward Lucinda beneath the edge of the contract. Her hand brushed mine as she collected the paper, folding it seamlessly into her stack without blinking. Celine narrowed her eyes but missed the exchange. My chest lifted, just slightly. I had set a counterweight into motion. Lucinda glanced down as if reviewing the documents, then her eyes lifted to mine. For a second, just a second, they met, sharp, knowing, steady. She gave the faintest nod, almost imperceptible. Then she turned her attention to Celine and Dorian. "We'll need to verify a few things privately with Mr. Brenner," she said calmly, her tone iron wrapped in silk. Celine froze, her smile cracking. Dorian shifted, annoyed. I sat still, letting the silence do the work. And in that instant, I knew this battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The chair creaked as I sat back down at Lucinda's desk. The same vent humming, the same bland art on the wall, yet the air felt several degrees colder. It wasn't the temperature that had changed, it was the choreography of the room. Celine adjusted her chair so that it angled slightly toward me, narrowing my space. Dorian planted himself diagonally behind me, arms folded like a sentry. I'd seen this sort of squeeze play before in negotiations at the factory years ago. I reminded myself of an old phrase we used in the shop: measure twice, cut once. The advice wasn't only for machines, it applied to people. 2. Watch, record. Don't give them the reaction they want. I glanced at the stack of papers in front of me. Neon flags marked every page, sticky arrows pointing at signature lines. Whoever had arranged these hadn't done so randomly. It was engineered to rush me into consent. The clock on the wall read just past 11, still late morning, but the minutes felt stretched. I thought of President Reagan's words I once admired: trust, but verify. That was my rule now. Every answer I gave would be short, factual, and noted in my memory as if I were building my own transcript. Celine leaned forward. Her tone dipped in honey. "Dad, you already agreed to this last week. You might have forgotten, but we talked it all through." I hadn't. No such conversation had ever happened. I logged the lie silently. Dorian jumped in, his voice casual, rehearsed. "You mixed up your pills on Tuesday. Maybe that's why you don't remember." He said it like he was concerned, but his eyes flickered with something closer to triumph. I looked at him evenly. "On Tuesday. I filled my organizer at exactly 9 a.m. I haven't missed a pill since your mother-in-law passed." My voice stayed calm, but the precision cut through their pretense. Selena's smile stiffened. "We're just doing what any good family would. Dad, help us help you." They reached for every American guilt line in the book. Neighbors who supposedly thought I was vulnerable. A pastor's advice about surrendering control for peace of mind. Social shame is a sharp weapon, but I refused to bleed. When I asked to read one of the clauses, Celine cut me off. "He gets overwhelmed by details," she told Lucinda as if I weren't there. "It's easier if he just signs." I raised a hand gently. "Slow down. Point me to the clause. We'll take this one page at a time." My words weren't loud, but they carried weight. Seniors watching would understand. Authority doesn't need to shout. The room's silence was broken only by the whir of a copier somewhere down the hall. A small dome camera blinked red above us, its light winking. Every tap of Celine's manicured nail against the desk landed like a drumbeat, measuring the tension. Dorian leaned in, his tone slippery. "We already booked a notary. He's on site. This won't take long." So they had prepared every step. They weren't improvising. They had choreographed the scene. Celine slid the pen across the desk, aligning it perfectly with the bold line of the first signature. The act was subtle, but its message screamed, "Just sign." I picked the papers up, skimming, careful. "I'll read them." "Dad, that's stalling," Celine pressed. "You know these are just standard forms." Her words were meant to reframe caution as delay, prudence as stubbornness. I kept my tone even. "Then there's no reason I can't read them." Lucinda stood nearby, her expression the definition of professional neutrality. She didn't intervene, but I caught the way her gaze tracked me, quietly attentive. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a phone propped up on a side chair, its camera lens pointed in my direction. I shifted my forearm casually across the table, blocking its view. They wouldn't capture me nodding, wouldn't twist my silence into consent. Dorian's palm landed on my shoulder, a little too heavy, steady pressure designed to keep me in place. I leaned an inch forward so he had to withdraw it to keep balance. A subtle move, but enough. Celine tapped the signature line again, her tone syrupy. "Dad, just here. You're making this harder than it needs to be." I uncapped my Parker pen, setting the tip gently against the page. But in my other hand, I held the cap tightly. A small act of defiance. I wasn't committed. Not yet. "I will read before I sign," I said clearly. "That is not confusion. That is adulthood." Her eyes narrowed. She tried one more twist. "Respect your elders." "Dad, isn't that what you always taught me?" But she had inverted the phrase. Respect had become obedience. I wasn't going to let her flip the meaning of dignity. I placed a finger on one clause buried in the paragraph. "Explain this. Joint access. Withdrawals without my consent. Say it in plain English." Her mouth opened, then closed. She hadn't expected me to target specifics. I slowed the tempo further, turning each page deliberately. "Page 1, please." Dorian leaned over, talking too fast, fumbling for authority. In his rush, he slipped. "We need this settled before the weekend," he muttered. There it was, their timetable. "I want a printed summary," I said. Celine's voice sharpened. "Dad, these are standard forms." "Standards are still readable," I replied. Then I turned to Lucinda. "May I have the official brochure on joint accounts?" Lucinda didn't break her composure. She disappeared for a moment and returned with a pamphlet, sliding it across the desk. I thanked her by name, letting my daughter know I wasn't alone. An old saying rose in me, one my neighbors used back in the day. "If it ain't in writing, it ain't real." I said it aloud, and Lucinda nodded ever so slightly. Inside, I told myself, patience today, counsel tomorrow. I didn't need to win this battle in one stroke. Seniors listening would know. You can slow the play without flipping the table. The door clicked, and the notary stepped into the frame. His arrival wasn't chance. Celine had summoned him, tightening the noose of time. She picked up the pen again, placed it firmly in my hand, her voice dropping low. "Don't be dramatic, Dad. Just sign. Please." The papers were angled so the signature line cut straight across my vision. It was stagecraft, pure and simple. I set the pen down carefully on the desk, straightened the packet, neither signing nor refusing, just creating space. Lucinda cleared her throat with perfect timing. "Before any notarization, we'll need a private verification with Mr. Brenner." Dorian's jaw tensed. Celine's practiced smile cracked at the corner. I folded my hands on the table, steady as stone. I looked at each of them in turn, holding their gaze. "Good," I said. "Let's verify." At Lucinda's desk, My thumb drifted across the groove of my pen, the cool metal sparking an unwelcome memory. It was last Sunday's dinner, the night at Celine and Dorian's house that had left its mark deeper than any paper cut. The steady hum of the bank's air vent mirrored the HVAC drone from their dining room. Sounds like that. Consistent and low, carve themselves into your head. I reminded myself. Memory isn't nostalgia, it's evidence. Evidence that explained why I wouldn't let myself be rushed today. Those same smiles, that same careful choreography of concern, always seemed to end with me pinned near a signature line. So I decided to lay it out in my head, beat by beat, as if my mind were cross-examining them. Seniors watching would know the truth of an old saying. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. When I'd arrived that evening, the house was staged like a magazine spread. Candles flickered on the sideboard, soft jazz filled the corners, and the dining table stretched longer than the number of guests justified. It was architecture designed for distance. Place cards sat neatly on the plates, a touch Celine had picked up from one of her social clubs. Mine was positioned at the very end, right by the service cart, practically in the walkway. I wasn't in the circle of conversation. I was stationed like furniture. Celine smiled as if it were thoughtfulness. This way the twins can pass you the rolls easier, Dad. But the reality was different. I was cut out of the main line of sight, where the real talk would flow. Dorian took the head of the table opposite Celine, and their glances triangulated across me like I was invisible glass. Elara, their daughter, was seated beside her mother. I noticed that too. It wasn't random. When estate talk came up, Celine would control what her daughter heard. I didn't protest. Silence was my notebook that night. Another rule from the factory floor. Measure twice. Cut once. The conversation started light but carried a strange undertone. Words like safety, stairs, and streamlining kept popping up, as though rehearsed. They weren't asking questions, they were delivering conclusions. When I tried to answer, my voice had to cross the entire table, and Celine cut me off mid-sentence, pivoting neatly to Dorian as though I hadn't spoken. Then came the social proof tactic. Our neighbor, she said she worries about you living alone. The words dangled like an accusation, framed in the mouth of an unseen witness. Just for peace of mind, Celine repeated. Whose peace of mind? I asked quietly. For a moment, the air froze, but then the jazz swelled louder, filling the silence with its false warmth. Elara, innocent, leaned forward. Who signs for the house? Grandpa? Her question hung there like a bell, but Celine snapped the rope, steering her away. Eat your peas, honey. That told me more than any document could. They were already shaping her understanding, so I logged it in my head. Time, phrasing, who said what. I imagined drawing arrows on paper, just like I used to chart safety incidents at work. Evidence mattered then, it mattered now. Dessert arrived with its own performance. Maribel, their housekeeper, wheeled in a neat cake box. She placed a slim folder beside my plate. I accidentally used your card last week. Mr. Brenner, just need to square up. The folder wasn't casual. Receipts were highlighted, totals bolded, like it had been drafted in an office. Too professional to be an accident. Dorian smiled, clinking his glass. Dad, this is a good practice chance. Why don't we try the online banking together? I smiled back, polite but firm. After dessert, Celine leaned in, offering to log in for me, framing it as kindness. It'll keep Dad stress-free. But it was a test, a soft rehearsal for what they'd try at the bank. I read the receipt carefully, a round number that didn't match what I remembered from the menu. Where's the raw slip? I asked. Her pause was short but telling. Then she produced the real one, reluctantly. I set cash on the table, deliberately. If it ain't in writing, it ain't real, I said, sliding the folder back across the polished wood. After dessert, the micro-affronts multiplied. Your hearing must miss half the conversation, Dorian joked, his laugh a shade too loud. I repeated their earlier phrasing back word for word, showing I hadn't missed a syllable. His grin faltered. Celine chimed in, praising my good mood as though my composure meant consent. That was the trap. Silence, mistaken for agreement. Dorian raised his glass. To simpler days ahead. I raised mine too, but didn't drink. I watched his eyes instead. He saw that I understood. When I excused myself to the hallway, I studied the photos on the wall. Not one of them centered me in years. Evidence of quiet erasure. I came back, offered to wash dishes, but used the moment to glance through the drawer where spare keys and bills were kept. Every move was reconnaissance. The fluorescent snap of the bank's overhead lights pulled me back to the present. My hands were steady because that dinner had been the rehearsal for tonight's trap. The neon flags on the bank documents lined up in my mind with dessert receipts and bold totals. Same technique. Rush, corner, close the deal. Lucinda reached for the intercom, her voice calm. We'll need a private verification with Mr. Brenner. I thought of an old line I admired. A man's got to know his limitations. Mine were clear, and surrender wasn't one of them. The side office door opened with a soft click. I stood, slipping my pen into my pocket. Not my pride. Last Sunday they'd placed me at the far end of the table. Today, I was choosing my own chair. Lucinda guided me into a glass-walled office just off the main floor. The door shut with a soft click, muffling the outside murmur of Celine's voice and the impatient scrape of Dorian's shoes. The room had the sterile order of compliance. Posters with bold headings about financial rights, a camera dome angled high in the corner, and a legal notepad resting square on the desk. It felt less like a bank consultation and more like evidence storage. I reminded myself of a line I'd learned long ago. When the room gets smaller, make your answers bigger, clear, steady, no flourishes. Lucinda adjusted her glasses. Mr. Brenner, this part is standard protocol. We check comprehension of documents and screen for undue influence. Do you understand? Yes, I said, my voice calm. I'm here voluntarily. I want to understand every clause before I sign anything. No drama, just clarity. She nodded, tapping her pen once, and began her checklist. I steadied my breath the way I once did on the factory floor before a precise cut. Slow is smooth is fast. Through the glass, I saw Celine gesturing. Her phone lifted like a prop in a play. Dorian stood near the notary, folded arms tight, radiating impatience. Lucinda leaned in. Have you felt pressure from family, clergy, neighbors, anyone, to sign today? I didn't flinch. I've noticed a pattern. Unnamed neighbors quoted. A pastor's supposed advice, always secondhand, never directly from the source. Her pen scratched notes. For the record, I continued, social proof can be social pressure. Everyone says is not evidence. Celine's outline appeared against the glass. She mouthed something, then motioned as if to enter. Lucinda raised her hand, firm. Verification must remain one-on-one. I set my hands flat on the desk. I'll listen after I'm done, I said evenly, pitching my voice so the microphone caught every word. Right now, I'm the client. This is my time. Celine's smile froze on the other side. Lucinda shifted to neutral questions. Can you state today's date, your purpose for visiting, and the authority these documents would grant? I gave each answer slowly. Today's date is November 23rd. Purpose is to review documents concerning account access. Authority granted is joint access, meaning funds can be withdrawn without my permission. Lucinda's eyes flicked up, registering my plain English summary. I continued. That's not just backup. That's control. She asked for examples of recent memory. I gave verifiable details. The cash I paid a contractor on Monday, the receipts I still had in my wallet, the precise groceries I'd bought at Kroger. Then I leaned back. I request copies of all drafts. I'll review them with my counsel before signing. No accusation, I added, watching her pen. Only procedure. Her tap changed rhythm. Neutral had become protective. Trust, then verify, I said softly. And if you can't verify, you wait. Then my phone buzzed on the desk. A preview banner lit up the screen. Celine's name, her words, not meant for me. If he balks, say he agreed last week. Notaries ready. Move deposit to hold the suite by Fry. For a moment, the hum of the vent was the only sound. I angled the screen so Lucinda could see. Do you want me to forward this to the branch email for your file? Lucinda kept her face neutral, but she drew out her phone, captured the screen into the bank's evidence app, time-stamping and initialing the entry. Outside. Dorian's phone buzzed. He typed quickly, a reply flashing across his face, the name Caleb showing at the top of his screen. I didn't interpret. I didn't need to. I simply noted. No arguments, no raised voices, just receipts collected. Feelings are fuel, I murmured, more to myself than her. Documentation is the engine. Lucinda clicked boxes on her worksheet, marking suspected undue influence. She laid out the next steps clearly. We will separate the parties. Notarization will pause. You'll be provided disclosures about joint access risks. Nothing will proceed under pressure. I nodded once. Please call my counsel from the landline. Then I sent a single text to my lawyer, now followed by the branch address. Efficient. Nothing extra. I want a hard stop on changes today, I added. Agreed, she said. Bank policy allows it. Through the glass, Celine spread her hands in an act of concern. Her expression practiced. Dorian checked the clock again, the notary's pen hovering like a sword waiting to fall. Lucinda slid pamphlets across to me. These outline common red flags, rushed timelines, third-party answers, scripted phrases. I studied the bullet points, each one ringing true. If they're rushing you, I said, half to her, half to the camera dome, it's probably for them, not for you. The door opened, but not for them. A security associate stepped into the threshold, posture relaxed yet firm. His presence shifted the air. Dorian moved first. I need to... Lucinda cut him clean. We'll bring Mr. Brenner out after verification. Thank you for waiting. Celine's tight smile cracked at the edges. She lifted the pen again, her third attempt today, but there was no paper in front of me anymore. I slid my phone into my breast pocket, the evidence secured, and turned back to Lucinda. Let's finish your checklist. The notary glanced at the wall clock, tapping his pen nervously. Time, once their weapon, was shifting to my side, and for the first time that morning, I wasn't the one being moved. The room was. Lucinda and I stepped back into the main office, the quiet glass room now behind us. The notary sat stiffly, pen uncapped and ready, as though the pause had been nothing more than a brief recess. Celine flashed a smile that felt too bright, and Dorian's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle tick in his cheek. The stack of papers waited exactly as we'd left them, tabs lined like neon arrows, pointing toward my surrender. I rotated the packet 90 degrees so the signature line no longer sat directly in front of me. A small gesture, but deliberate. Body language that said no without needing the word. Lucinda adjusted her stance beside me. Her tone was even, but firmer than earlier. We'll proceed only step by step, and only if Mr. Brenner feels fully comfortable. I laid my Parker pen horizontally across the top page. A pause sign. No drama, no theatrics, just control. If it matters, I said, letting my words carry. It's worth doing right. Lucinda asked me to provide a written statement in my own words for the file. I agreed, pulling the notepad toward me. Slowly, carefully. I printed, I feel pressured today. These changes are not my choice. Then I dated, timed, and initialed it, sealing the page with clarity no one could twist. She read my words aloud, then stamped and countersigned. The notary exhaled sharply, realizing the tone of the room had shifted. Celine broke in. He's confused. Lucinda raised a palm. Client comprehension is documented. We follow bank policy, not family opinion, Dorian groaned. You're wasting the notary's time, Lucinda replied evenly. Notarization cannot proceed under suspected undue influence. I leaned back, voice steady. We're not in a hurry. Money should never hurry a family. The line echoed like a gavel. Celine tried a softer note. Dad, we only want peace of mind. I met her eyes. Whose peace? List it for me. The silence that followed said enough. Dorian shifted. This is industry standard. I held out my hand. Show me the clause. Plain English. Lucinda slid across the brochure I had requested earlier. I read aloud. Joint access allows any account holder to withdraw without consent of the other. Then I summarized. You could move funds without telling me. That's not backup. That's control. Celine's fingers hovered over my pen. I placed my hand over it, calm, firm. Ownership of more than just ink. Specifications beat promises, I said. If it isn't specified, it doesn't happen. Lucinda scribbled a brief note. The room was no longer a family gathering. It was a ledger, and every word mattered. I leaned forward. Who booked the notary? Who mentioned a deposit due Friday? For what suite? Celine flinched, her practiced composure cracking. Dorian spoke too quickly. Just options. His answer betrayed foreknowledge. I pressed on. Will any funds move today, yes or no? Neither spoke. One more, I added, my tone deliberate. Did you tell anyone I agreed last week? The misfired text from earlier sat behind me like a silent witness. Celine reached for safety, her favorite pivot. I didn't allow it. Yes or no? The notary checked the clock. Delay now exposed them more than haste. Lucinda's pen scratched briskly. Client asks direct financial benefit questions. Family non-responsive. Their spin collapsed into ink. Lucinda closed the folder. Branch decision. Pause all changes today. We will print full disclosures, provide copies to Mr. Brenner only, and document family presence. She looked at me. Would you like separate appointments moving forward? We can also place courtesy calls to your counsel. Yes, I said simply. Dorian muttered. This is overkill. Better safe than sorry is not overkill, I answered calmly. The phrase older than both of them combined. Celine reached for the stack again, but Lucinda slid it firmly to her side of the desk. The table itself had shifted allegiance. Add a note to the account, I requested. No changes today. Time-stamped. She keyed it in, then nodded once. I capped my Parker pen and slipped it into my pocket. Not today. Not like this. The branch door chimed. Footsteps. A security associate entered. Posture relaxed, but presence undeniable. Celine hissed, You're making a scene. I looked at her evenly. I'm making a record. Lucinda stood, closing the file. We'll schedule a new appointment after Mr. Brenner consults counsel. The notary began packing up. Dorian stepped forward, his hand angling toward my shoulder. Security shifted, just a shadow, but enough. He stopped short. I rose slowly, pushing the chair back with steady balance. Breath even, bearings intact. 3 Bs, my old foreman used to say. Balance, breath, bearings. I met their eyes. If you wanted speed, you should have brought honesty. I brought time instead. The papers were locked away on Lucinda's side. The meeting supposedly paused, but I could feel the pressure snake back into the room. Celine's smile no longer carried syrup. It sharpened into urgency, her voice threading with phrases like, We don't have much time, and the deposit deadline can't wait. Deadlines I hadn't agreed to, hadn't even known existed. I didn't argue. I logged every word in my mind like chalk on a shop board. Dorian stepped closer than courtesy allowed, his frame blocking the corridor, as if he could box me in with posture alone. The notary lingered awkwardly, his bag half-zipped, his presence now more excuse than witness. I shifted my chair toward the exit. Nothing dramatic, just the simple geometry of a man refusing to sit cornered. For those who've lived long enough, you learn posture can speak louder than a paragraph. If they rewrite the clock, I thought, I'll rewrite the room. Then his hand landed on my shoulder, heavy, practiced, thumb pressing near my collarbone. Not violent enough to bruise, but insistent enough to send a message. Move where we want you. I didn't jerk. I leaned forward by an inch, forcing him to rebalance, his grip sliding awkwardly. A small lesson in physics, Nothing still can be held without consent. I spoke evenly, voice pitched to carry across the room. Remove your hand, Celine hissed. Dad, don't be dramatic. Twisting the act into my supposed misbehavior. Again, steady, I repeated. Remove your hand. Lucinda's eyes snapped to the contact. The soft shuffle of security shoes reached my ears. A rhythm just outside the door. When they turned private pressure physical, I reminded myself, you make your boundary public. I began logging it out loud, each word precise as a timestamp. Hamilton Trust, manager's office. Late morning. Dorian Brenner placed his right hand on my left shoulder, thumb pressing near the collarbone. Lucinda wrote as I spoke, her pen catching every syllable. Do you wish this added to the account interaction record? She asked. Yes, I said. Dorian pulled back, rolling his shoulders like a boxer warming up, irritation flashing in his eyes. I didn't return the stare. I looked only at the documents. Paper outlasts posture. Celine slipped into her caregiver script. He's tired, but the balance had shifted. The process was louder than her performance. I added one final sentence for the record. I do not consent to physical guidance. Then I dated and initialed it. A simple act. Adult. Final. Names. Times. Places. Facts are the flashlight when someone else tries dimming the room. At Lucinda's nod, I stepped into the corridor, phone already in my palm. My thumb fired off one word to Thaddeus Pike, my attorney. Now. The reply came in seconds. A call buzzing through. I answered, pressing my back lightly against a compliance poster like a man anchoring himself to the rules on the wall. I spoke in bullets, not feelings. At bank, pressure from family, attempted signature, physical contact logged, statement filed, need protective action. Thaddeus's tone was metronome steady. Do not sign, ask for printed disclosures, authorize the bank to speak with me directly. I'll file preliminary protections today. I placed the phone on brief speaker. Lucinda, my attorney. She bent slightly. Giving the branch ID and confirming an undue influence review was active. Thaddeus's closing line carried iron calm. You did right. Stay still. We'll handle the rest. Meeting at 3. I ended the call with more oxygen in my lungs than when it started. Back inside. Lucinda moved with efficient precision. She printed copies of every page for me alone, keyed in the "No Changes Today" flag, and added incident of contact to the official record. I signed the release allowing the bank to speak with Thaddeus directly. No debate, no delay. Efficiency over argument. Celine leaned in, voice honeyed again. Maybe just one account. Dad, something small. Lucinda shook her head. Policy requires review before any partial changes. Dorian gestured toward security. Is that really necessary? Just helpful, Lucinda answered, placing them squarely in his line of sight. I requested a separate appointment. Next week, alone. Lucinda confirmed it while quietly mapping a discreet exit route. If they push your boundary once, I thought, build a fence. If they push it twice, add a lock. As I tucked the packet into my jacket, I caught a glimpse of Dorian's phone buzzing. The preview flashed a single word. Caleb. I stored it without flinching, like pocketing a tool I'd need later. Celine slid into my path near the corridor, her voice sugar coarse. We're not done. I looked her square in the eye. For today, we are. Security opened the door. A draft of cold air swept across the carpet, clean and bracing. The fluorescent hum behind me faded like a machine powering down. My phone buzzed again. Thaddeus's message. Check your email. First filings drafted. I glanced once over my shoulder, not at their faces, but at the desk where my signed statement lay stamped and safe. They wanted my signature. Instead, I signed the start of a case. The drive home after the bank felt longer than usual. The silence inside my house carried a different weight now, heavier than paperwork or bank walls. I hung my jacket on the chair by the door, only to find Celine and Dorian already there, seated at the dining table as though they owned the place. They must have driven ahead to make sure impatience looked like initiative. The table where birthdays and Thanksgiving once lived had turned into an arena. Their folders and papers lay across the wood grain like weapons lined up for battle. I walked to the head chair, the seat that once meant I carved the turkey, blessed the meal. Sitting down now felt like staking a claim in disputed territory. I thought of something I once heard from a veteran at church. Some wars aren't fought overseas, they're fought across your own dinner table. And as I settled in, I knew exactly what he meant. Celine opened fire first. She didn't raise her voice, she sweetened it. That kind of condescension laced with sugar. Dad, everyone is worried about you. The neighbors told me you've been acting confused. Even the bank staff looked concerned after that little note you scribbled. I let her words hang a moment. Her tactic wasn't new. Make me doubt myself. Make me embarrassed of defending myself. Dorian leaned in, his voice lower but cutting. Guardianship is a legal option, you know. Courts don't wait for confusion to become danger. They act early. They weren't attacking my assets. They were aiming at my dignity. I placed both palms flat on the table, steady. Guardianship is for the unable. I just stopped you from railroading me at the bank. Celine tried to laugh it off, but the sound cracked at the edges. She wanted me small, ashamed. Instead, I gave the truth without tremor. For any senior listening, don't let their mirror twist your reflection. Dorian shifted gears. Fine. If you keep dragging this out, I'll speak with Reverend Hallstrom. We won't keep writing checks for a church that lets its pastor enable this nonsense. He knew my faith was my anchor, my fellowship. He was trying to cut me off from the one circle I trusted. I folded my hands, staring right through him. If Reverend Hallstrom is a man of God, he won't let your checkbook dictate his prayers. The sting of that threat cut deep, but not where he intended. It showed me just how cruelly they were willing to wield power. They expected collapse. Instead, I offered clarity. For those listening, here's the truth. When they threaten to shrink your circle, dignity doesn't shrink. It grows stronger when tested. I excused myself, walked calmly into the hallway, pulled out my phone, and called Thaddeus Pike. I relayed everything, guardianship talk, church leverage. His voice was steel. Write it down, every word, today. So I returned with a notebook, opened it in plain sight, and began writing. I didn't shout, didn't accuse. I documented. Celine's face pinched. You're paranoid, Dad. I kept my pen moving. Paranoia hides, evidence writes. The scratch of my pen filled the room louder than any accusation. Their intimidation, once private, was now becoming public on paper. That unsettled them more than my words ever could. Celine's composure snapped. Her palm hit the table, scattering papers like startled birds. Enough of this. Dorian leaned forward, his voice breaking as he tried to sound powerful. Courts won't look kindly on this kind of resistance. I didn't answer. Silence can be louder than thunder. I leaned back, arms folded, letting the air stretch until their own words echoed back at them. They filled the space with explanations, backpedaling, contradictions. Sometimes the strongest move is stillness. At last, I spoke. I have legal counsel. I will not be signing anything today, or tomorrow, or the day after that. The meeting was over, though they hadn't realized it yet. As they gathered their papers, Celine paused in the doorway. Her face was taut, voice low, carrying more venom than volume. Then don't be surprised when we take this further. I didn't flinch. That's what lawyers are for. Dorian muttered to her, maybe not meaning for me to hear. We'll make him the villain. Their words hung in the air like smoke from a fire they lit themselves. When the door shut behind them, I sat back down at the table. The same wood grain where my children once played with toy cars now bore the weight of betrayal. I opened my notebook and wrote the last line of the day. My children became my adversaries today. They thought this was about signatures. They were wrong. The war had shifted. It was about legacy now, and I knew the battlefield had just widened. The air outside still carried the sting of Celine's last words. But by mid-afternoon I was back at Hamilton Trust. This time I wasn't walking in alone. Lucinda met me at the door with her usual composed face, and Thaddeus Pike walked beside me, his briefcase swinging like a metronome. She led us into a glassed conference room that looked more like an aquarium. Clear walls, polished table, every move visible from the hallway. On the table lay a red folder stamped in bold, Undue Influence Review, Brenner. That title wasn't just ink, it meant procedure, posture, the law itself taking notice. Security stood at a polite distance by the door, arms crossed but not threatening. One detail told me everything. The notary wasn't here, no signatures on the menu today. Thaddeus took the seat to my left, his legal pad closed, pen capped. His presence wasn't for theatrics, it was weight, assurance, the kind you don't need to announce. Lucinda set her own rules before anyone could speak, one person at a time. No touching. Devices face down unless requested. Any breach ends the meeting. Her tone made it clear she wasn't bluffing. I drew a slow breath. Institutions in this country may crawl, but when they finally move, they move like freight trains. Today felt like one of those turns. Lucinda opened the folder, her reading voice steady as stone. First, she listed my written statement from the day before, then the misfired text Celine had sent, photographed and time-stamped. Next, the log of physical contact, Dorian's hand on my shoulder. Finally, the pause order she'd issued on all changes, each item stacked like bricks in a wall. Risk, she said, is clear. Joint access permits unilateral withdrawal. That exposes vulnerability in suspected elder financial exploitation cases. She named federal guidelines, state codes. It wasn't opinion, it was regulation, hard and cold. Her verdict? Monitoring flags activated, all changes frozen until review, and a new appointment set, for me alone. Celine cut in, her voice pitched sweet but sharp. He's confused. You can't just... Lucinda didn't raise her voice, didn't argue. She simply noted the interruption, then returned to her readout like Celine hadn't spoken at all. Dorian scowled. This is overreach, a family matter. Lucinda answered with policy paragraphs, section numbers that carried more authority than his indignation. Thaddeus gave a single nod, like a mechanic confirming torque specs on a bolt. And I thought, paper is a mirror. When it's clean, spin can't see itself. Celine shifted, trying for sympathy. We're just trying to help. To protect him. That's when Thaddeus finally spoke. His voice was calm but cut through the room. Help never requires secrecy. Help never requires speed. I leaned slightly forward, my words steady enough to be etched in stone. For the record, I do not consent to any account changes today. Lucinda repeated the sentence aloud and wrote it down, her pen scratching permanence into the page. Dorian tried one more angle. Guardianship might be the only path. Thaddeus interrupted, not unkind but firm. On what clinical evaluation? You have none. Silence fell, heavy as a dropped curtain. Lucinda offered printed disclosures. I accepted them, hands steady, my movements plain, no theatrics, just facts. Even the hum of the HVAC sounded like a metronome, marking time on my side. I remembered a shop maxim I'd once repeated to my son. Measure twice, cut once, especially when the wood is your life. A buzz shattered the quiet. Dorian's smartwatch lit up, face down but angled just enough for all to see. Message preview. Caleb Drower, Sunset Overlook. Hold expires. Fry 4 p.m. Need his co-sign transferred to Lock Suite 214. Can Mike notarize? Lucinda didn't flinch. She read the words into the record. Dorian scrambled to flip the watch. But too late. Thaddeus leaned in, requesting the content preserved by screenshot. Dorian refused, jaw set. I didn't raise my voice. I asked one question, clear enough for every corner of the glass walls. Did either of you put money down on a facility using my funds or my name? Celine stammered. We were exploring options, but her eyes darted toward Dorian, chasing a second buzz that might appear. Lucinda added a line to the file. Third-party financial interest disclosed. The folder seemed to grow heavier with every word. Celine's mask cracked into desperation. Dad, there's urgency here. You don't understand. Thaddeus leaned forward, voice sharp. Urgency you created is not my client's emergency. Dorian tried to recover with jargon. Industry standard. This is how placements work. Lucinda slid over a brochure on joint access and pointed to a clause. I read it aloud, slow enough for every syllable to sting. Plain English can gut any spin. I lifted my head. For the record, I request a formal elder abuse report be filed to compliance, and if required, to state authorities. Lucinda nodded, already typing. The clicks of her keyboard sounded like locks sliding into place, this time on the right doors. Security moved subtly closer, not aggressive, but final. The era of intimidation was over. Thaddeus pulled a sealed envelope from his briefcase, laying it on the table like a brick. This is a demand letter. From this moment, no contact outside counsel. Lucinda slid one final page across to me. No neon sticky tabs, no urgency, just a clean acknowledgement form, proof that I requested the report. I uncapped my old Parker pen, steady in my grip, and signed, not surrender, safeguard. The only signature I'd give today was the one that shielded me. Celine hissed under her breath. You'll regret this. She meant it as a leash. She didn't realize the leash had already snapped. Thaddeus stood, closing his pad. We're finished here. I rose, slower than they wanted, but steady. Paper in my pocket, air in my lungs, time back in my hands. They had come for my name on their line. I left my name on the line that stopped them. I came home from the bank with the packet under my arm, setting it down on my desk like a piece of armor. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that might have felt heavy yesterday. But tonight it was useful. I laid the packet out, sorted each page, my statement, the freeze notice, the compliance readout. Then I opened a fresh yellow legal pad and wrote across the top, today's facts, one by one. I wrote down the events with times. I knew memory fades, but paper keeps its shape. My Parker pen rested next to the phone. Ready. That wasn't morning. That was planning. Thaddeus called to a line. His instructions were short and sharp. Preserve texts. No in-person meetings without him present. Route all contact through his office. I nodded into the phone, though he couldn't see it. Square your corners before you raise the walls, I muttered to myself, repeating an old carpenter's proverb. The paperwork was my corners. I was building something strong. An hour later, the phone rang again. Reverend Hallstrom's voice came through. Careful. Almost too careful. So, could we clear the air? Just for the good of the family? His phrasing carried Celine's cadence, like she'd drafted the script. I agreed, but on terms. Speakerphone only. And my attorney joins the line. Pastoral is fine. Legal goes through counsel. On the three-way call, Celine's voice spilled in fast. Dad's confused. He doesn't realize how unsafe this delay makes everything. Dorian chimed in, leaning on the word guardianship. I didn't argue. Instead, I read my bank acknowledgement line word for word. I requested the elder abuse report and a hold on changes. Calm is louder than shouting when the air is tight. Thaddeus came next, citing bank policy. His tone carried no heat, just law. The Reverend's breathing slowed. Then he said, If this is procedure, I won't intervene against process. I asked him for one favor. Please don't let the church be used as leverage. He agreed, and I thanked him, on the record. That small shift turned an ambush into a documented consult. Minutes later, a family group text lit my phone. The words were crafted carefully, casting me as the obstacle to care, the reason they were forced to act. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the thread to Thaddeus with a simple subject line. Framing. Evidence, not argument. On my pad, I wrote a heading, Pressure Vectors. Underneath, 3 bullet points, reputation, time, isolation. Naming them shrank them. Fog becomes map when you label it. For myself, I drafted a short statement I could use if anyone in the neighborhood called. I'm competent, represented, and not signing under pressure. Consistency is armor, and armor doesn't argue. It protects, I told myself. If they can't win at the bank, they'll try to win in your neighborhood. Knowing the tactic meant I wouldn't flinch. Then came the message that twisted the day. My granddaughter, Ilara, texted, Grandpa, Mom said not to tell, but this is wrong. My chest tightened, but I answered gently, You're brave for telling me. Send only what you can. She sent a photo of her tablet, a message thread with a calendar entry. Suite 214, deposit deadline Friday 4 p.m., stamped with the date. Another image followed, a PDF labeled Sunset Overlook Hold, payer details. My last name sitting in a note field like a brand. I thanked her, told her she'd done the right thing, and reminded her to keep her phone safe. She was a child, not my investigator. My job was to protect her, not the other way around. I forwarded the files to Thaddeus. His reply came back one word. Perfect. Not perfect in joy, but in proof. I printed 2 copies, slid them into a sleeve marked Tab C, Assisted Living Plan, unauthorized. Evidence, not rumor. Thaddeus emailed a draft declaration for me to sign. I added my details, dates, quotes, where it happened, who said what. I signed it and gave him authority to request logs from the bank's IT to back up the timeline. Then I built my binder. Tab A, Bank Statements, Freeze, Compliance. Tab B, Communications, Texts, Group Threads. Tab C, Assisted Living, Ilara's Screenshots. On the front, I stuck a note. Dignity is evidence too, show it in the margins. For anyone listening, 3 rules. Write it, date it, store it. Memory is kind, but courts prefer paper. The hum of my cheap printer filled the room. Page after page slid out. A small American choir of protection. Dusk settled when I noticed headlights outside. A car idled at the curb. Then a knock came, firm, official. At the door, a courier held a manila envelope. Inside, emergency petition for temporary guardianship, ex parte. Hearing, Monday 9:00 a.m. The exhibits showed texts clipped out of context, claims of my confusion, a care plan at Sunset Overlook. I didn't flinch. I set the petition on the desk beside my binder. 2 stacks facing off like chess armies. I snapped a photo of the cover page and texted it to Thaddeus. His reply came quick. Good. Now it's on paper. Exactly where we win. They brought court to my door. I'd been building my courtroom at my desk all day. The morning of the hearing started before sunrise. I shaved, put on my navy blazer, and laced up comfortable shoes. You don't dress to impress a judge. You dress to stand in your own truth. At the kitchen table, I spread my binder open one last time. Tab A held the bank records. Tab B, the communications. Tab C, the assisted living screenshots. My Parker pen slid into the spine like a flag. Thaddeus texted, Arrive 20 early. No hallway debates. Let paper talk. I finished my coffee, straightened the corners of the binder, and drove downtown. I noticed the small things, parking validation slips, the hum of courthouse security trays, the way people shuffle belts and shoes into bins. Nerves are natural, preparation is a choice. By the time I walked into courtroom 3B, I was breathing even, shoulders loose. I chose the second row aisle seat, visible to the bench without looking performative. Before the clerk called the docket, Celine tried soft power in the hallway. She leaned close and whispered, Dad, if you just sign today, we can avoid embarrassment. Dorian followed, his voice low and sharp. Guardianship is routine. This judge signs them all the time. His eyes darted to my binder. He wanted what I carried. But he feared it too. Thaddeus stepped in, calm as stone. Counsel is inside. Please direct all offers there. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I opened my notebook and wrote the exchange down. Date, time, summary. Evidence turns intimidation into ink. A bailiff posted the morning schedule. There it was. Emergency petition. Temporary guardianship. Ex parte. I almost smiled at the word ex parte. I was standing right there. We moved into the courtroom, and I placed the notebook atop the binder. My quiet reminder: paranoia hides, evidence writes. Their attorney opened first. Words like confusion, safety, urgent placement floated through the air, but no clinical declaration followed, just anecdotes. The judge leaned forward, asking, "Where is the medical declaration?" Silence filled the room. They stammered about observations, but procedure doesn't bend to stories. Thaddeus rose. "Your Honor, my client is competent. The bank intervened under undue influence policy. Joint access was misused. We request status quo protection." His words fell like weights. I kept still, eyes on my pen, breathing steady. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let the record speak. The judge's voice sharpened. "You seek to control his finances and residence based on texts and impressions?" The courtroom bristled. I realized then, procedure isn't cold. It's how dignity is weighed. The ruling came faster than anyone expected. The emergency petition is denied. The judge's tone was crisp, final. Any guardianship must proceed with notice, counsel, and independent evaluation. He ordered status quo. No asset changes, no facility admissions, no contact outside counsel, on pain of contempt. An evaluator would meet me at home that week. I welcomed it. "I have nothing to hide but my pin," I said for the record. A ripple of uneasy laughter broke from the gallery. The judge's eyes cut back to Celine and Dorian. "Your emergency appears of your own making." Dorian dropped his gaze to the table. Relief washed through me. Not triumph, but the kind of breath you finally hear after holding it too long. Thaddeus slid me a note. "Stay steady. Evidence in next." We weren't done. We were beginning. Then came the turn that sealed it. Thaddeus moved to admit Lucinda Fox's sworn affidavit. It included my note at the bank, the compliance readout, and the internal freeze order. Exhibits followed. Transaction logs showing attempted transfers, and the smartwatch notification everyone had seen in that conference room. Names redacted where needed. Minors protected. He tendered Alara's screenshots under seal. "A child did the brave thing," he said. "We minimize her exposure." The judge accepted the filing without hesitation, ordering a 48-hour accounting of every withdrawal and deposit touching my accounts in the past 60 days. He directed formal notice to Sunset Overlook. No funds to be accepted without my written consent. Then he added, almost like an afterthought, "And counsel, remind your clients, urgency is not license." I leaned back, letting the weight of it settle. For the audience in my mind, this is what boundaries look like on paper, orders with verbs. The judge signed the minute order. The sound of the stamp was like a door locking, on the right room this time, out in the corridor. Celine's eyes shone with anger, not grief. Dorian's phone buzzed. I caught the preview. Suite 214 canceled. He turned away, whispering into the receiver. I didn't follow. Thaddeus murmured beside me, "We'll move for fees and a protective trust next." His tone was business, not celebration. I stepped outside. The sky was sharp and bright, the kind that makes you squint even when you're steady. I texted Lucinda, "Thank you. The court listened to your paper." She wrote back almost instantly, "Paper protects." I walked down the courthouse steps thinking, they came for my choices. The law came for their shortcuts. By Friday, their accounting would be due. Paper would either clear them or bury them. The silence in my house after court was unlike anything I had felt in weeks. Papers sat in neat stacks on the dining table, binder closed, pen resting where I had left it. For the first time since all this began, I didn't feel the urge to scribble or add notes. Instead, I underlined passages already written. Underlining wasn't anxiety. It was acceptance. Courtrooms are noisy even when no one is speaking. Every shuffle of paper, every cough, every chair scraping against marble floors carries weight. Coming home felt like stepping out of a storm into still air. I reheated a bowl of soup, set one plate on the counter, and ate without apology for the solitude. Later I walked the yard. November air was sharp, but it cleared my chest. The sycamore branches stood bare, stripped but upright. They reminded me that endurance doesn't depend on leaves. It's in the trunk that still rises, season after season. The phone rang mid-morning. Celine's voice was soft, almost girlish. "Dad, maybe we went too far, but you've always been stubborn." Her words seemed gentle, but every sentence carried a hook. "We just wanted to keep you safe. You know how forgetful you get sometimes." We worried. Then came the pitch. "There's a simpler way. A limited management agreement. Just so we can help. Nothing binding. Just family looking out for you." I listened, holding silence like a scalpel. Sometimes you don't counter every thrust. You let them swing at air. When I finally spoke, my words were flat, deliberate. "Safety isn't control. Celine, I choose my own pen." She gasped softly, maybe shocked I wouldn't take the bait. I ended the call before she could lace apology with another accusation. An olive branch dipped in vinegar isn't peace. It's seasoning for the next demand. I sat for a long while afterward, staring at the photographs on the mantel. Family should be where you rest your guard, not where you sharpen it. Yet here I was, choosing boundaries over belonging. James Baldwin once said, "Love takes off the masks we fear we cannot live without, and know we cannot live within." I thought about that. Celine's mask was permanence. Pretending blood meant loyalty. Mine was hope, that if I just endured, things might return to what they once were. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike, running beside her until she found her balance. I remembered standing at her graduation, clapping so loud my hands hurt. Those memories felt like they belonged to a stranger's life. Nostalgia can be a leash if you let it dictate the present. I made tea in my grandmother's chipped porcelain cup. That cup had survived 3 generations of kitchens. It reminded me that care and continuity exist beyond betrayal. As I drank, my chest felt heavy and light at once, mourning and release, twins sharing the same rib cage. 2 days later, I met with Thaddeus Pike. We sat in his office, blinds tilted just enough for privacy. He slid documents across the desk. "Protective trust," he explained. "Once signed, no guardianship maneuver can touch it." I read every line, pen steady. My signature didn't tremble, not because I felt invincible, but because I finally felt finished. The accounts were mine, guarded by structures no relative could bend. Thaddeus added, "From this point, all communications go through counsel, no direct calls, no doorstep arguments. Distance isn't cruelty, it's oxygen." That night, I drafted a short letter. Future communications through legal counsel only. I signed it with the same pen I had carried through court, sorrow sharpened into clarity. Choosing a wall wasn't rejection, it was survival. Midweek brought small reminders that community still held me. Reverend Hallstrom called, not as mediator but as pastor. "How are you?" he asked simply. I answered with care, not distrust. Lucinda emailed, "Accounting complete, irregularities confirmed. Process is working." Paper became reassurance, not burden. Elara sent a single heart emoji. I replied with a photo of the sycamore tree. No words, no risk, just quiet connection between grandfather and granddaughter. I walked to the corner store that afternoon. The clerk greeted me by name, asked if I thought the cold would last. That small normality steadied me more than any order stamped in court. Community isn't blood, it's recognition, repetition, the nod of a neighbor who remembers your brand of coffee. As evening fell, I sorted the last family photographs still in plain sight. I didn't burn them, didn't shred them, I slid them into a drawer. Out of sight, not destroyed. Memories don't need to be erased, they just don't deserve to dictate. I locked my front door and slipped the keys into my pocket. My pocket, not Celine's purse. That small jingle was mine again. Sometimes dignity isn't the roar of a courtroom victory. Sometimes it's deciding whose knock you won't answer anymore. The phone buzzed on the table. An unknown number. I let it ring. Silence was my answer. By stepping back, I wasn't losing family. I was saving myself from the version of them that no longer knew love. Friday afternoon. The minute hand slid past 4:30. and my email chimed. Thaddeus had forwarded the court-ordered accounting. The PDF was clinical. Each line a nail driven straight into the truth. Deposits, withdrawals, timestamps, device IDs. I scrolled slowly, breathing evenly, though my pulse tapped hard at my wrist. There it was, the assisted living deposit marked in my name, care coordination fees, and, tucked between them, a so-called marketing retainer. I didn't need anyone to tell me what that meant. It was a line tying my house to a broker before I had signed a thing. Facts don't need theatrics. They're sharp enough on their own. I told myself, if facts are bullets, aim at policy, not people. A metadata field caught my eye. Caleb Drower listed as contact, pre-live. That single phrase was the match to the Tinder. I called Thaddeus, voice steady. It's here. He answered without hesitation. Cease and desist goes out tonight. Brokerage compliance, licensing board, all of it. Their scheme stops before another sunrise. I set Lucinda's card next to my Parker pen. For weeks I had repeated her words to myself, almost like a prayer. Paper protects. Tonight, they finally felt like gospel. Saturday morning, we walked into the brokerage office. The lobby gleamed with polished tile, the walls lined with framed photographs of smiling families at closings. I wondered how many of those smiles had hidden regret, how many pens had moved under pressure. The receptionist tried to stall, offering coffee, insisting the managing broker was unavailable. Thaddeus didn't raise his voice, but his words carried weight. We require the managing broker. The court order compels. Rules outlast charm, and swagger wilts under policy. Then Caleb appeared, grin already in place. The kind of grin he probably wore when convincing a widow her house would sell faster than she deserved. But when his eyes fell on the binder in Thaddeus's hand, on the stamped order clipped to the front, that grin cracked. I spoke one sentence, measured and unshakable. You don't move a man's house by moving his signature around him. The managing broker, summoned from the back, read the papers, and her decision was swift. The pre-live listing was deleted from their MLS sandbox. A compliance file was opened on the spot. Potential elder financial exploitation. Caleb's confidence drained like air from a punctured tire. We left without triumph in our steps. My revenge wasn't gloating. My revenge was a record that would follow them. Unavoidable. Indelible. Monday morning. We returned to probate court. The judge had the accounting, Lucinda's affidavit, and Thaddeus's motion for restitution and fees. The air was sharp. Words clipped short. The ruling came clean. Guardianship petition dismissed with prejudice. All funds withdrawn without my consent to be restored. Attorney's fees awarded. Protections extended. No admissions. No account changes without my signature. Any violation would land them in contempt. I rose, my voice clear. Your Honor, I appreciate the court's protection. My pen is mine. The judge gave a slight nod. Dorian stared at the table as though it might open and swallow him whole. Celine's hands were folded so tightly her knuckles blanched. The weight they had tried to drop on me had rolled back on their shoulders. Outside, Thaddeus shook my hand firmly. We don't crow, he said quietly. We comply. Victory didn't need shouting. The stamp on that order was enough. Consequences rippled outward. HR from Dorian's insurance company placed him on administrative leave, citing the court orders and irregularities in the accounting. At the church, Reverend Hallstrom's bulletin carried a thoughtful essay titled Care versus Control. No names were mentioned, but everyone in town could read the lines between the lines. Caleb received a certified letter from his licensing board, file number stamped. Response required in 15 days. The walls were closing in where he once thought doors opened easily. Celine, through her lawyer, tried to wrap the mess in ribbon. We'll withdraw everything for family harmony. But the court wasn't sentimental. A condition was set. She would sign a retraction acknowledging my competence, formally renouncing future attempts to control my affairs. She signed. That document is sealed, but its existence is carved into the docket. For me, relief didn't roar. It sighed. The air in my chest was my own again. When the restitution funds cleared, I chose not to hoard them. Instead, I created the Brenner Education Trust for my grandchildren, Alara, Jonas, and Bram. A third-party trustee would manage it. Their parents would never touch a dime. I recorded a short message for them, locked in a sealed envelope until their 18th birthdays. In this family, we fund futures, not fears. That was the legacy I wanted, not lawsuits and bruised trust. I sent a copy of the court order to the assisted living facility. Do not accept funds or admissions in my name without my written consent. Ever. The receptionist nodded, eyes wide. The trail was laid, the trap was closed. I mailed Lucinda a thank you card with a modest donation earmarked for the bank's elder protection program. I wasn't tipping her. I was investing in the very system that had shielded me. Thaddeus filed the last complaints with licensing boards and confirmed the elder abuse report was logged. Each filing was a brick in the wall I had built around my dignity. Revenge? Not by breaking what broke me. Revenge. By restoring what they couldn't touch. Back home, I changed the door code. The new digits were the year I first learned to sign my name, a reminder that my hand, my choice, still wrote my life. I placed the education trust binder beside my grandmother's porcelain cup on the shelf. One inheritance of paper, one of porcelain, both built to last longer than betrayal. My phone buzzed. A picture from Alara, a pencil sketch of my porch beneath the sycamore tree. I smiled and typed 3 words. Always your granddad. Evening dropped a quiet blanket over the street. I sat by the window, watching the sycamore stand tall against the fading light. My phone rang once. Unknown number. I let it ring. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're architecture. Then the mail slot clinked. A certified letter slid onto the rug, addressed not just to me, but to Alara, too. I looked at the envelope but didn't break the seal. Sometimes the last signature isn't putting pen to paper. Sometimes the last signature is the choice not to sign at all.